Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you've become the most interesting man in a room you weren't even allowed into 10 or 15 years ago. It's disorienting. You look in the mirror and notice the small receipts of time, a few gray hairs you didn't order, a metabolism that negotiates harder than it used to, maybe a little stiffness if you sleep the wrong way. And yet your phone is lighting up with messages from women who, back when you were in your prime physical 20s, treated you like you were part of the wallpaper. That feeling isn't confidence. It's more like stepping into an alternate timeline. And if you don't understand what's actually happening, you'll misread it as, I finally made it, when the truth is more complicated and a lot more useful to you once you see it clearly. Welcome back to the channel. Here, we don't do fairy tales, and we don't do academic fluff. We talk about the raw psychology of relationships, the incentives people don't admit out loud, and the practical tools you can use to make decisions that protect your future. Because what's happening right now in the dating world is not random. It's not magic. It's a market correction. And if you're a man in your late 30s, 40s, or beyond, especially if you're a regular, hard-working guy who built his life one brick at a time, you may be noticing the shift. Women you barely spoke to in your 20s are suddenly checking in. Women who once had a rigid checklist are suddenly flexible. Women who once moved like they had endless options are suddenly asking real questions about commitment, stability, and where this is going. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse attention with respect. You'll confuse urgency with desire. You'll confuse being chosen with being needed. So today we're going to pull the curtain back calmly, clearly, without bitterness on why this happens, what it means, and how to respond like a man with standards instead of a man hungry for validation. Give me the next few minutes and I'll hand you a framework you can use for the rest of your life. Let's start with the first uncomfortable question. Did you actually become more desirable? Or did the room simply get smaller? Because if you're 42 and you've got a decade of stress on your face and your hairline has opinions now, and you can't eat like you did at 22, are you objectively more physically attractive than you were back then? Most of the time, no. So what changed? The market did. And if you want to understand dating in a way that keeps you from making expensive mistakes, you have to stop viewing it like a romance movie and start seeing it like what it often is in practice. A marketplace of attention, time, intimacy, and commitment. Now, I know some people hate that word marketplace because it sounds cold, but cold doesn't mean false. It just means it doesn't flatter anyone, and reality doesn't exist to flatter anyone. In a marketplace, people have leverage. That leverage shifts over time. When someone has endless choices, they become picky, not always cruel, but selective. When choices shrink, people get practical, sometimes humble, sometimes anxious, sometimes both. In your 20s, especially if you were an average guy, average height, average salary trajectory, average social status, you were competing in a brutal attention economy. Not because you were worthless, because supply and demand didn't favor you. A lot of women in their early to mid 20s sit at the peak of attention. Not peak character, not peak wisdom, peak attention. Their inbox is full. Their social media is full. Dating apps put them in front of men who are older, richer, more experienced, and often more confident than the guys their own age. That creates a psychological distortion that many people don't recognize until later. Because if you can access something, you start believing it's your level. You confuse proximity with belonging. You confuse being invited into the VIP section for a moment with owning the nightclub. And this is where the trap forms. A young woman can be in an entry level job, with roommates, with an old car that sounds like it's coughing, but her phone makes her feel like royalty. She matches with a surgeon. She matches with an attorney. She matches with men who look like they're professionally photographed for a living. She goes to high end restaurants. She gets flown out for weekends. And her brain quietly upgrades her expectations from nice to have to minimum requirement. Not because she's evil, because human beings normalize what they experience repeatedly. If your reality for 3 years includes high status men taking you out, your nervous system starts calling that normal. And then the guy her age, the guy in accounting, the guy in logistics, the guy building his career starts looking beneath her. Too ordinary, too slow, too predictable, not enough spark, not enough adventure, not enough lifestyle. So she filters him out. And the scary part is, it feels rational while she's doing it. Because she isn't thinking in probabilities, she's thinking in vibes. And the apps encourage that. Filters encourage that. Culture encourages that. Don't settle. Know your worth. Never compromise. Those slogans sound empowering until you realize they can also become a way to avoid reality, avoid gratitude, and avoid long-term thinking. So what happens? A huge percentage of women end up competing for the same small percentage of men, the men at the top of the attention pyramid. And here's the part nobody wants to say plainly: those men have the least incentive to commit early. If a man has unlimited options, commitment becomes a cost. Not because commitment is bad, but because commitment closes doors. And men with endless doors struggle to lock themselves into one room. So the dynamic becomes predictable. Young women get access to high tier men. High tier men enjoy the access, but many of them don't convert it into long term partnership. Meanwhile, the solid men, the men who would actually build a stable life, get overlooked until later. And later is where the correction arrives. Not as revenge, as math. Now let me give you a story. Different names, same pattern. We'll call her Lauren. At 24, Lauren is convinced she's building her best life. She's smart, attractive, and socially plugged in. She's dating men in their 30s who have resources and confidence. A couple of them take her to places she never could have afforded herself. One of them puts her on a yacht for a weekend. Another one posts her just enough to keep her hopeful, but not enough to claim her. And she interprets this as progress. She tells herself, this is what I'm used to now. Then there's a man in her orbit. Let's call him Ethan. Ethan is 26. He's stable. He's consistent. He's building his career. He's not flashy, but he's dependable. He's the type who would be a good husband if the relationship was built with mutual respect. Ethan tries to get her attention. Lauren doesn't insult him. She doesn't have to. She just doesn't select him. Because in her mind, he's not the ceiling. He's the floor. So Ethan gets placed into the category many men know too well. Useful, but not desired. A helper, not a choice. A support character, not the lead. Ethan learns the lesson a lot of men learn in their 20s. If you don't have leverage, you don't get treated like you matter. So he adapts. And this is where men change their life. Not because someone motivated them, because reality disciplined them. Ethan stops performing for attention and starts building value. He increases his income. He improves his health. He tightens his social circle. He learns how to communicate with confidence instead of apology. He becomes more selective, not bitter, selective. He stops trying to convince people to see him. He focuses on becoming undeniable. And 10 years later, the message arrives. Hey, how have you been? No explanation, no accountability, just a soft re entry. Like the last decade didn't happen. Lauren is now 34. She's more accomplished, better apartment, better wardrobe, more self awareness maybe. But the dating market around her has quietly changed. The men who used to give her that luxury experience are still out there, but many of them are now focused on women in their mid to late 20s, women with less baggage, fewer disappointments, and more optimism left in their eyes. So Lauren's inbox shifts, not emptier, just different. The options that used to chase her are now casual. The men who were once unavailable are now busy. And the men who used to be invisible to her men like Ethan suddenly look like stability, safety, and a real future. So she reaches out. And here is the key point for you. When someone chooses you because their preferences matured, that can be genuine. When someone chooses you because their options collapsed, that's a different thing. You need to learn to tell the difference. This is where men get confused because attention feels like validation. And men who didn't get much attention when they were younger are especially vulnerable to confusing attention with love. If you were the guy nobody picked, the guy who got ignored, the guy who watched louder men get rewarded, then later, attention can hit you like a drug. It feels like you're finally being seen, finally being chosen, finally being appreciated. But the man who wins long term is not the man who celebrates too early. It's the man who asks better questions. Questions like, why now? What changed? What does this person actually value about me? Do they want me or the life I represent? Do they respect me or are they relieved I'm available? Because there is a difference between desire and pragmatism. Desire says, I want you. Pragmatism says, you will do. And if you build a life where you're constantly being tolerated instead of wanted, you will pay for it in resentment, disrespect, and regret. Now, some of you are already thinking, Harold, you're making women sound calculating. No, I'm making humans sound human. Men do the same thing in different ways. A man might ignore a good woman when he's younger because he's chasing novelty. Then later, when life hits him, he wants peace. He wants loyalty. He wants a home. He wants someone steady. That can be maturity, or it can be panic. The point isn't to villainize anyone. The point is to recognize incentives, because incentives don't care about your feelings. They care about outcomes. Now, let's talk about something that shows up in these late stage relationships. I call it settlement resentment. This is what happens when someone internally believes they should have gotten more, and they carry that quiet disappointment into the relationship. They don't say it directly, they leak it. It comes out as small jabs, comparisons, sarcasm, passive dissatisfaction. The relationship looks fine on paper, but the vibe is off. Here's a story. We'll call the man Marcus. Marcus is 44. He's not a celebrity, not a millionaire, just a solid man. Steady income, owns his place, keeps his health decent, has a calm nervous system, meaning he's not chaotic, not addicted to drama. In his 20s, Marcus was the guy women asked to help them move. Reliable hands, reliable back, reliable truck. But when it came to romance, he was often kept at arm's length. He got the, you're such a good guy speech. He got the, I just don't feel the spark exit. He watched women choose men who were exciting but unstable. Then Marcus hits his 40s, and suddenly his calm becomes attractive. His stability becomes sexy. His consistency becomes mature. Women message first, women follow up. Women want to talk about what we are. And Marcus almost mistakes this for destiny. He thinks, I finally became the man. But what he actually became was rare. Because stable men who stayed disciplined, avoided wrecking their life, and kept building through their 30s, they're not common. A lot of men crash out. A lot of men stagnate. A lot of men get bitter. So a man who kept going becomes valuable. Not because he's perfect, because he's functional, focused, and steady. Now Marcus starts dating a woman, we'll call her Vanessa. Vanessa is 39. She's educated, attractive, and she's tired. And tired is not an insult. Tired means life has been life. She's been through the situationships, the almost relationships, the we're not labeling it, the I'm not ready, the I don't know what I want. She's heard it all. Now she wants something real. So she dates Marcus. And at first, it looks good. But then the little leaks start. When Marcus picks a nice, normal restaurant, Vanessa mentions how she used to love a certain high-end spot. When Marcus drives his practical car, Vanessa jokes about how she never pictured herself with a man who drives something so responsible. When Marcus talks about building a quiet, stable home life, Vanessa hesitates like she's mourning an alternate life she thought she was guaranteed. Marcus starts feeling something that many men struggle to name. He feels like he's being evaluated as a solution, not loved as a man, like he's filling a vacancy, not being chosen with enthusiasm. And here's the danger. A relationship built on relief instead of respect turns toxic over time, because the person who feels like they settled will eventually punish the partner for not being the fantasy, and the partner will eventually resent being used as a landing pad. So what are the signs you're dealing with urgency instead of genuine connection? Listen closely. 1. The deadline push. If someone is pushing hard for milestones fast moving in, marriage talk, kids talk without actually building a deep bond, it may not be love. It may be a timeline. 2. The comparison language. Statements like, you're not my usual type. I normally date different men. I didn't expect to end up with someone like you. Sometimes people say these things innocently, but often it reveals something important. You are not the preference. You are the practical choice. 3. The performative interest. They're very interested in your job, your stability, your plans, but oddly uninterested in your inner world, your values, your character, your vision, your boundaries. They want the structure you provide, not the man inside it. 4. The speed without curiosity. They want fast commitment, but they don't want to deeply know you. That's a red flag, because commitment without comprehension becomes control. 5. Irritation at normal life. If they act disappointed when life isn't luxury level, if they romanticize a past with men who were more exciting, if they seem chronically underwhelmed by a stable routine, that's settlement resentment. And you can't love someone out of that. They have to heal it, or it will bleed into everything. Now let's address a topic that makes people uncomfortable, but adults need to be able to talk like adults. Aging is not symmetrical. Men and women both age. Everyone loses certain advantages. Everyone gains certain advantages. But the timeline pressures are not identical. For many women, there is a more intense urgency around family building because fertility declines with age. For men, the biological window is generally wider, although health, lifestyle, and age still matter. This doesn't mean men are superior. It means the incentives are different. And when incentives are different, people behave differently. So if a man is 42 and has built stability, his market value for long-term partnership can rise because stability is scarce and time-tested. If a woman is 42 and wants children soon, her urgency can rise because the window feels narrower. That urgency can create intensity that looks like passion, but sometimes it's not passion, it's pressure. Again, not evil, human. But if you confuse pressure for love, you'll make decisions you can't undo. And men pay a heavy price for rushing commitment with the wrong person financially, emotionally, and spiritually. So you must slow down long enough to see what's real. Let me give you another story. We'll call him Adrian. Adrian was invisible in his 20s, not because he was a bad man, because he was quiet. He was busy working. He wasn't flashy. He didn't know how to market himself, so he got ignored while louder men got attention. Adrian didn't collapse. He built, he learned, he improved. He became the kind of man who could lead a household, not just impress someone at a party. At 41, Adrian reconnects with a woman from his past. We'll call her Camille. Camille is charming, intelligent, and very direct. Within a month, she's talking about serious intentions. Within 2 months, she's talking about timelines. Within 3 months, she's talking about not wasting time. Adrian feels flattered, but also uneasy, because she isn't really asking about him. She's asking about the plan, and the plan is important, but the person matters more. So Adrian does something most men don't do. He pauses, he watches, he asks better questions, he looks for consistency, he looks for accountability, he looks for humility, he looks for signs that she values him, not just what he can provide. And that pause saves him, because over time, the mask slips. Camille starts showing irritation when Adrian sets boundaries. She gets anxious when he doesn't move at her speed. She pressures him with guilt. If you cared, you'd commit faster. That's not love. That's leverage. That's fear trying to drive the car. Adrian steps away. And yes, he feels lonely sometimes, but loneliness is cheaper than the wrong marriage. Loneliness is cheaper than being used. Loneliness is cheaper than building a life with someone who sees you as a rescue boat. Now, I want to be very clear. This message is not avoid women your age. It's not date younger, no matter what. It's not be angry. It's not punish people for their past. It's simpler and stronger than that. It's this. You've earned the right to be selective. If you spent your 20s and 30s building working, improving, learning, staying disciplined, you do not owe your future to someone who only wants you now, because their other options dried up. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to lecture anyone. You just have to live by standards. Because standards are what separate a man who gets used from a man who gets respected. So what should you do if the "hey, stranger" messages start showing up? Here's the framework. First, don't get high off late validation. Attention is not a trophy, it's a test. Second, require clarity. If someone reappears from the past, don't accept vague energy. Ask adult questions. What made you reach out? What are you looking for now? What do you value in a partner? How do you handle conflict? What did you learn from your last relationship? You're not interrogating, you're screening. Third, look for accountability. A mature person can acknowledge the past without defensiveness. They don't need a dramatic apology, but they should be able to say something like, I wasn't in the right place then. I didn't prioritize what mattered. I made choices I wouldn't repeat. If they rewrite history, minimize it, or act offended that you remember reality, that's a warning sign. Fourth, watch their relationship to peace. Some people are addicted to chaos. They call it chemistry. They call it spark. But what they really mean is anxiety. A healthy woman will appreciate your stability, not resent it. She will add peace to your life, not demand that you entertain her nervous system. Fifth, move at a pace that protects you. A man with options doesn't rush because he's not afraid of losing a stranger. He chooses carefully because the cost of wrong is enormous. Sixth, invest where you're respected. If you feel like you're being compared to ghosts, step back. If you feel like you're being pushed into commitment to meet a deadline, step back. If you feel like your value is being tolerated instead of celebrated, step back. Your future deserves a woman who sees you as a prize, not a plan B. Now let's address the final layer, the mindset shift men must make as they age. In your 20s, you might have believed love is something you earn by proving yourself. That's a common mistake. A man who grows up without much attention often learns to chase it. He becomes overly agreeable, overly helpful, overly available. He thinks if he does enough, she'll choose him. But real attraction isn't earned like points on a rewards card. Real attraction is the response to who you are and what you stand for. So in your 40s, your job isn't to audition. Your job is to select. And selection requires discipline. It requires you to tolerate being alone rather than accept disrespect. It requires you to be okay with someone not liking you. Because a man who needs everyone's approval will always be vulnerable to manipulation. You don't need to be cold. You need to be clear. Clear about your values. Clear about your standards. Clear about what you will build your life around. And clear about what you will not. Let me close with this. If you're a man who spent years being overlooked and you're finally getting attention, don't let that attention rewrite your self-worth. Your worth was never determined by who ignored you. Your worth was built by what you did when you were ignored, by the discipline you practiced when nobody clapped, by the work you put in when you weren't chosen, by the man you became without external validation. Now the market is shifting, and the world may finally be seeing what you've been building. But you're not here to collect late applause. You're here to build a life, a real life, a peaceful life, a respected life, a life with a woman who chooses you with open eyes and genuine desire, not because she's scared of time. So yes, enjoy the attention, but don't worship it. Use it as information. Use it as a filter. Use it as a signal to raise your standards, not lower them. Because the goal isn't to become someone's backup plan. The goal is to become a man so grounded, so self-respecting, and so intentional that you only commit to a woman who adds to your life instead of draining it. If you've lived this, if you've ever been ignored in your 20s and then had someone reappear a decade later, drop a comment with what happened and how you handled it. And if this framework clicked for you, comment the word marketplace. Not as a slogan, as a reminder to think clearly, move wisely, and never confuse late attention with real respect.